Welcome to the Fortean Winds podcast, where we talk about UFOs and all the related high strangeness. I go by Bones, and with us, as always, is Ram X.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Ram. So today we're going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein's temple to the conspiracies surrounding it. The mythology of the occult has been intertwined with his crimes. Just what if this truth is even more sinister than just summoning demons? Or what if the real magic was carefully crafted psychological weapon designed to create, a sense of immorality and power with these clients of his?
Yeah, there's been a lot of conspiracy theories that have framed Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise as an explicitly occult or satanic ritual type exercise. And this is the perfect type of thing for us to look into in this case. And we discussed this case thoroughly in the episode before last. So if you're looking for the groundwork or the basics of this case, it would be all in that. And once again, I will link to our Twitter thread that is replete with all sorts of factual information and sort of a timeline of the basics of this case. But there's been a bunch of new information that's come out since we've done that episode. Yep. And that'll probably come up today too, right?
Yep.
But let's take the bull by the horns here. That's an appropriate metaphor.
Works.
So we're going to talk about whether or not this is actually satanic. And because that's been the general conspiracy around it.
Right, there's clearly evil.
Yes, there's clearly evil. And I have to say, when I first started looking into this, I halfway suspected maybe something Crowleyan would be in there. Right. I'm going to, spoiler alert, it's not. But that's a good way to tell you that we take this seriously. We're actually looking for satanic or Crowleyan or black magic occult stuff when we looked at this. So let's start with the origins and the nature of that conspiracy theory. The theory was that Epstein's network was involved in satanic or occult ceremonies, which would imply something like formal magic or summoning or demonic invocation. It could also imply ritual murder. We would also look for that. We did. And there's some influences here that probably draw people in from pop culture. There has been movies like Eyes Wide Shut, and there's been a lot of documentaries on the satanic panic. And there's a bunch of internet conspiracies like QAnon, Pizzagate, etc. that involve some sort of demonic or satanic pedophilic ring. And then you find this elitist pedophilic ring, and then you're looking for the demonic part of it, right?
Right.
And then there was the architecture of the island, which almost invited something like this. It was a temple on the middle of an island, like some sort of movie villain.
Right.
And this looks like it's out of Rosemary's Baby Part 2.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it provides probably a false sense of security for some of his clients, I suppose. But it's very symbolic.
Yeah, great point. I think that is ultimately where it was going, was it wanted to elevate them to the status of gods or above human laws.
Right.
So what we ended up finding was more ritualistic behavior, which was methodical, and it wasn't magic. It was more like a cult with a C and not occult with an O.
Right.
There was a psychological strategy behind it of control and dominance. And we found a lot of similarities with like the NXIVM cult, NXIVM cult that the big actress Allison Mack was caught up in.
That's right. And that kind of follows the same timeline.
Right. What years was that NXIVM cult active?
So that was active, 1998 to 2018. And you did mention, Eyes Wide Shut. That was released, I think, around the same time, like 1999.
Oh, wow.
Kind of funny.
Everyone got the same idea at the same time, right?
Right.
Pretty disturbing. And we had no idea. There's time to catch up.
Right.
So then there was the temple itself, which evoked this blue and white stripes, a golden dome, symbolic statues. It had a picture of Epstein and the Pope in it. We know that a piano tuner went in there and said it was pretty bland. We would have been looking for some sort of ritualistic artifact. And the picture of him and the Pope doesn't quite cut it, but it is pretty disturbing. It wants to show you how he's okay with the Pope. So whatever he's doing is okay.
Right.
Like That's really more a very human type of evil, an attempt to elevate a human to the status of, a deity.
Right.
And this aligns with documented methods in cultic and exploitive networks. It's psychological manipulation that's disguised as ritual. It's not genuine occult rites. We would have definitely been looking for sigils if it was real magic. We didn't find any, and we didn't find any evidence of sigils or any sort of containment seals or anything like that.
Right.
What we found was structured control and victim isolation. So the testimonies of like Virginia Giuffre, Maria Farmer, Sarah Ransom, they described coordinated movements, isolation, carefully orchestrated victim introductions, and sequences of abusive acts. These were patterned behaviors that were imitating ceremonial structure, not ceremonial structure itself. And this is an important distinction. You can go back to some of our episodes on the occult when we really discuss the difference between occult and cult. And you can have cults that involve the occult, but it's not necessarily related.
Right.
Rather, Epstein employed ritual to break down resistance, and he induced trauma bonding. And we do know from our 14 studies that trauma has dramatic effects on the consciousness.
Yeah, and much like other cults, they find followers, at least the victims, are in a state of dire straits sometimes, looking for answers or looking for financial answers.
Yeah, in this case, they were definitely targeting women who were financially in need, that were looking for daddy. They were targeting people with daddy issues.
Right.
Now, our Fortean interpretation of this is more psychological interpretation, which would be that they knew that their acts were immoral and that these cult-like behaviors, the dominance, the attempts to silence the public, the attempts to silence the victims, these things are efforts for dominance and control. It's some sick game that the rest of us don't really understand. So you almost think it doesn't exist, but it definitely exists. And this network is exposing that. And we've seen the media play this out. And we've actually seen some great journalism we should call attention to during this time. Like Crystal and Cigar on the Hill over at Talking Points, they've been great like they are with UAP. Whitney Webb is a author who's done some fantastic work on this subject. She's got all the details. She's got more information about where he got his money and how he got his money. These things are out there. And then there's Michael Wolff, who's saying he understands what the real reasons why Trump and Epstein broke off.
Right.
Now, while Trump said Epstein stole his property, essentially, when he says that he stole Virginia Giuffre from him, that is not the case that they have said in the past. That wasn't what Epstein said in the past, and that wasn't what Trump said in the past. It was over real estate that their breakup happened. And that becomes an important piece of the story. Because Epstein and Trump are good friends back in 2004. And Epstein's putting a bid on this place in Palm Beach for $36 million, and it's a good deal. But he brings his buddy Trump over to give him advice on how to move the swimming pool.
Right.
So Trump comes over and he tells him how to move the swimming pool, and then he turns around and he puts in a $40 million bid on the house, and he gets it.
Right. Yeah, and that property, just a side note, that property came up many years ago because it was sold to a Russian oligarch shortly after that for a lot more money than market value.
Oh, yeah, you're skipping ahead because then Epstein gets pissed, right? He gets pissed after Trump buys the house from under him, and he knows that Trump doesn't have $40 million on hand because he's familiar with Trump's finances.
Right.
So he suspects that Rybolev, 2 years before Rybolev buys that house, he suspects and tells Michael Wolff that he thinks Rybolev gave him the money. And then sure enough, 2 years later, he buys the house.
Right.
That's the point when Epstein says, I can go to the feds and tell them you're involved in Russian money laundering. And then Trump says, well, if you do that, I'll tell them about the girls.
Right.
And then Epstein gets busted. And he tells Michael Wolff that he believes that it was Trump that sold him out.
Yep.
And then Epstein gets the sweetheart deal. So at that point, does he start handing over Russian money laundering operations? We don't know. Does he start handing over what he was doing with blackmail? We don't know. Does he hand over all of it? We don't know. But there were world leaders that were compromised in there.
Yeah.
And now they're taking action on the world stage with militaries behind them. So we should all find out.
Yeah, for sure.
So what does that tell us? It tells us that Trump and Epstein had a falling out. It tells us that Epstein turned over some sort of information to the Fed at the time.
Right.
We know for a fact that Epstein got the sweetheart deal. So look, if there's no conspiracy, if there was nothing going on, Epstein should have never gotten the sweetheart deal. All the criminal co-conspirators that got off shouldn't have gotten off. Like, Ghislaine Maxwell was part of the physical abuse. She wasn't just part of grooming and the control and the madam of all this operation. She was part of the physical abuse. She is in jail because she is the closest thing to Jeffrey Epstein right now. You're talking about letting her go.
Right.
We don't need her testimony. What we need is the information and the evidence that has existed for some time. The only reason to let her testify when she's been prepared by the Assistant Attorney General, who used to be Trump's personal criminal defendant, is so that she can be prepared to tell a story. I don't want to hear a story. I want to know what happened. If he's not guilty, let us see the files.
Now, if there's any story that should be told, it's the victims. The victims are just being ignored.
Which is crazy here, because they keep saying we don't want to re-victimize the victims. But the victims are saying, tell our story. Help hold those people accountable. You're saying you don't want to re-victimize these women, but now you're telling them that you're going to let go of their attacker right in front of their face.
Right.
What could be more painful?
Yeah, it's a strange string of events. I mean, especially when you consider her sentence is 20 years.
And that's too light.
Yeah.
And while you're talking about letting her go, you're talking about pardoning P. Diddy. You're putting someone with sexual assault charges against them in charge of kids' sports. You're attempting to normalize criminal sexual behavior. Those certainly look like the actions of a guilty man.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
We just want to see this all come out in court, and I think we might, because that letter to the Wall Street Journal, which Trump is now suing Murdoch over for $10 billion, that's already been analyzed by several sets of graphologists and then several sets of cultural analysts. And those results were published in both New York Magazine and People Magazine. Both forensic analysis showed what Trump was alleged to have written in the letter. And then they compared that to similar drawings where similar writing utensils and similar signatures were required. In both, the same gold marker or Sharpie was used, and they had the same consistent line width, ink saturation, and stroke tapering. The signature placement was consistent. It was centered beneath the drawing, which he said, "I never draw pictures." That was his response to the letter initially. There were a bunch to choose from. Mm-hmm. And then there was the traits of the signature itself, which had strong angular capitals on the D and the T. There was heavy pressure and trailing, underscoring lines visible in multiple samples. This was consistent across his drawings and signatures from the 2000s. So the question is, did someone fake it or not? And I guess we're going to find that out in court, assuming it ever goes to the level of forensic analysis. I guess you can place your bets on whether you think that's going to happen or not.
Right. I mean, there's also the chance that that was released by the family of Maxwell, who was very active in trying to get her out of jail.
That'd be an interesting development.
Yeah. But you got this system basically of abuse. Like an occult, it's not spiritual power they were looking for. They were looking for basically insulation, right? They were looking to set their own terms of morality without any accountability.
And it's interesting, in the last episode, I think we discussed how that insulation was happening at the legal and societal levels. This was almost an attempt to elevate themselves above morality and above spirituality.
Yep.
They wanted to replace the gods.
Yeah, pretty much. You mentioned that other, basically, was called Occult, that NXIVM issue, which was it's finally ended in 2018, and it involved actresses. The timeline's there. It's really kind of a strange timeline. And then when
it's extremely strange.
And when you think about QAnon, how their biggest thing was that they were going to expose this ring of pedophilia. I don't know. It's just strange to think about. Was that just like a huge operation, just as a projection, as trying to like just subvert everyone's attention?
I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. Like many of them in the community kept questioning that. And it's interesting to see how that community is reacting, because there's people who echoed that conspiracy. Like the Q thing died. The idea that this was a satanic conspiracy never really did.
Right.
And there's people who have been profiting off that and have been continuing to proselytize that. Like Michael Flynn is one of them. Let's start talking about some of the real names involved, because I know this is hard for some people. Maybe you voted for Trump. Maybe you feel duped. But look, he duped us in the first couple weeks. Like, we're a UFO show, and we spent like months on the drone thing, and he campaigned on that.
Yeah.
And it was like on day 2 when he just threw that in our face and then basically dismissed the entire UFO community.
Yeah.
And they all went along with it. For what? I don't care. Like, we call balls and strikes even here. We were not nice to Biden. Roll the tape, because he was not being transparent about UAP. So we continue to call him out on that. We're going to call out Trump for all of this. This show is about transparency and accountability too. And one thing that we ended up talking about here a lot, according to ChatGPT, is information warfare. I asked them, what is this show about, when we were doing our What is a Fortean episode?
No.
Like, we ended up talking a lot about information warfare, and it's the battle for your mind and soul, really.
Yeah.
So we talked about assets and agents and all this stuff, but you're seeing people with their kimonos off. It's like, we can drop all those semantics. Like, let's look at Glenn Beck, who profited off this conspiracy. Let's look at Charlie Kirk, who profited off this conspiracy. And let's look at them in this moment, like I said. And then let's look at the reverse. Let's look at people like Matt Walsh and Joe Rogan. Notice I'm not naming anyone on the left, because we don't want to talk about anyone's political motivations here.
Right. Yeah, they're very important. We have to talk about them just because of the impact they have.
Yeah, so those are huge. Joe Rogan is the biggest podcaster. He has a giant audience. And so for him to say, no, this is wrong, this is a line in the sand, like, that's a big deal. Like, that really shows some integrity on his part. And that's what strength looks like. I think he talks about strength on his show a lot, and it ends up being about jujitsu and wrestling. But hey, that to me is real strength. When you can say, okay, I've talked to these people, I've platformed them, I might be part of them getting elected, and now they're betraying us, and I'm going to call them out. That shows integrity. You could think what you want of Joe Rogan. It doesn't really matter to me. But we've been consistent about the things that we have cared about on this show. And this is a moment where we don't really have to prove who we are, I hope. Like, you know that we're just going to call these balls and strikes even. We haven't called him out as looking guilty until he started acting extremely guilty. What type of analyst would I be if I didn't say that and move forward with the investigation as if that is happening? If I felt for the gaslighting, how would you ever trust me again?
Right. Good point.
And I look at people like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro. They have two completely different takes on this. And Matt Walsh, in spite of the fact that he knew he was going to lose some of his audience, came out and said, this is wrong. I won't be a part of this. I'm a Christian. I cannot do this. Ben Shapiro came out and started shilling for the administration. You get a choice at that point. Even if you're just watching that network, do I want to watch the guy that's accepting the truth that's right in front of him, or do I want to believe the lie?
Right. And when you believe the lie, you're also believing an algorithm, because there's coordinated responses from political entities, very funded entities, and it all kind of wraps into the same algorithm depending on where you're consuming the information.
Absolutely. Charlie Kirk is the prime example of that. He has a conference, he invites Tucker Carlson, and they talk all about how this Epstein stuff is being covered up and it's a conspiracy. Then he gets a phone call from the Trump administration. And then he says, hey, guys, I'm done talking about Epstein for the time being.
Right.
And then he gets ratioed. So he says, oh, I was just saying for that day. And then he gets ratioed again. They're like, now you're gaslighting us again.
Right.
I don't know how that guy continues to have an audience, but the only reason he does is because people say, I prefer this lie to the truth.
Right.
We have to call those things out.
Yeah, we do, because I don't know about you, but one of the values in what we do is that we are outside of the algorithm. I mean, no one really is altogether, but we strive to be.
We're pretty damn close. I mean, completely self-funded.
Yeah.
No ads, no sponsors. Even with our UFO and paranormal research, I'm in touch with a limited number of people because I don't want those kinds of influences. We can do our own homework here.
Right.
Oh, what a wicked web we weave.
Yeah.
But I bring all of that up because this is how it's working up there. And this is coming out right now. And I don't care about the R's and D's involved.
Right.
I just want the corruption cleared up. If that's what I got to do to get some UFO metamaterials, let's do it.
Right. We talked about the cult, and we talked about Epstein and how it's, or maybe not so related. It needs to be talked about. Everything ties back together because, last episode we talked about Fort, what it meant to be a Fortean, and I just came up with it. We're the anti-algorithm. Fort would never. He was anti-algorithm for his time.
That's perfect.
But anyway, we'll probably touch on this again because I have a feeling this is going to be developing.
Let's take this opportunity to get some accountability and transparency. I mean, we can just focus on that. If we get this, we'll get our UFO stuff.
Right. It's strangely all connected. But hey, good talking to you again, Ram, as always.
Same here, Bones. Next time, we're going to focus on something pretty crazy. I think we're going to talk about the apocalypse.
Of course. Well, have we not talked about
all the people that are... right? Or all the people selling the apocalypse
right.
would be more accurate.
I don't know how we haven't touched on that. But yeah, thanks again, everyone, for listening. You could always go to our website at forteanwinds.com. Thanks.
Thanks, y'all.